Hello and welcome to today's webinar presentation, Internationalizing and Localizing Cisco's TelePresence, a case study. Today we have with us Richard Fulbert, QA Manager at Cisco, Gary Condon, Localization Engineering Manager at Sagen, and Adam Asness, CEO and President at Lingoport. As I said before, please feel free to submit questions using the Q&A and chat interface on your right-hand side of the computer. Also, as I just mentioned, we'll be recording this session, and all the registrants will be receiving a link to the recording of this webinar. Just a quick word about the presenters today. Richard Fulbert has over 20 years of experience in telecommunications technical support for Rollm, IBM, Siemens. Richard joined Cisco Systems in 2000 and is currently the QA manager of Cisco's TelePresence. Gary Condon is a localization engineering manager at Sagen and has worked in the localization industry for over 15 years. Gary is based in Dublin, Ireland, and manages Sagen's European and China-based engineering teams. Last but not least, Adam Asness founded Lingoport in 2001 and focuses on sales and marketing alliances while maintaining oversight of the company's internationalization services, engineering, and globalizer product development. Myself, my name is Chris Ralph. I'm the marketing director here at Lingoport. Now, without further ado, I present Richard, Gary, and Adam. Gentlemen, it's all you.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Appreciate the introduction. We're going to get quickly moving. We have a lot of people registered for this webinar, actually 185 as of this morning. But I want to just briefly, I expect there to be a lot of interaction, and given that you can't see us, Richard, would you say hello so people know your voice?
Sure. Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining.
Okay, great. And Gary, he's easier to tell.
Yeah, you can tell from my my Irish accent. So.
All right, very good. Very good. All right, so I'm going to launch forward with a little bit of background. I wanted to play this video because, well, it's entertaining, but it shows what telepresence is quite well. The trick will be whether you can see it through this streaming interface. And here we go. You know what? You won't be able to hear it. Hold on, I'll hold my phone up to the speakers.
It's Cisco equipment, sir. It's almost better than being there.
Is this because of my bed bugs? I will not be ostracized like this, Jack. Bed bugs have become an epidemic in New York. I just think that everyone would feel more comfortable if you stayed in your office. You like the Cisco equipment?
Of course, it continues to be the gold standard by which all business technology is judged. Cisco, the human network.
You don't think I heard that? I can hear your hair growing on this thing. You are discriminating against me. I'm a human being. Did you just mute me? Did you just use Cisco's cutting-edge short-view technology to mute me? Because we got I'm going to come to your house and go over your bed. I'm going to bite you on the ass. Do you hear me?
All right. Well, I hope that streamed across okay. It may not have, but what I was, besides that being the very best product placement within a television show that I've ever seen, they actually turned it into wrote an episode around using that. It really just demonstrates what the system is. Telepresence is this. It essentially is a business travel killer. But besides that, it just lets parties meet on a very large video screen with a lot of detailed resolution. And when you use it, you really have the sense that you've actually met with somebody versus just having a small video call or a conference call. It has a whole power that you have to use to really understand. But there's a lot to this system. It integrates with a phone, a calendar, the company network. So there's quite a bit under the hood besides just the data transmission and compression and image movement. And you can see in the screen, there's a phone, there's an embedded system in this phone, there's off somewhere else some server stuff, and as I mentioned, it integrates with a company's network quite a bit. So that's a quick introduction to what telepresence is. And there's a clear business mandate with a tool like telepresence. It's a global product by its nature. Cisco is having very strong demand for their telepresence system. It's extremely popular in boardrooms. When I've mentioned telepresence to other clients, they all know what it is. You can see ads for it here on the in the U.S. at least. I can't vouch for outside the U.S., but you can see ads for it regularly. So it's a very, very visible technology product that's having a very large impact on boardroom level meetings or even just day-to-day corporate meeting structures. So there's a clear return on investment in terms of revenue to support a global demand. But like a lot of products, it was very, very successful very quickly. And so supporting that global audience needed a separate effort to bring things forward. By the way, just so you have an idea of what things look like, this is what Lingoport's test bed looked like. This was in a room. Interestingly enough, we even had an exhaust fan in the room right here, pumping out to the outside of the window because this little puppy has quite a number of servers in it, and it generates a lot of heat. You see the two phones, and these are test bed monitors. In a real setting, these monitors might be, say, 50 inches or more across, but we just use a regular 21-inch monitor for the test bed. And all three would be together for either 3 different locations or sometimes encompassing a boardroom, which you can kind of see in this picture. You'll have a boardroom where everyone can see each other across the table. All right, so just briefly to give a little background, Lingoport, we've been around for a little while now. It's actually our 10th anniversary, although we haven't done any fireworks to celebrate it. But the company was started in 2001 on my kitchen table, so to speak. But we provide a whole bunch of internationalization services that starts with maybe a lot of assessment and project planning activities, but we also do full internationalization development with entire engineering and testing community development here in our building here in Boulder, Colorado. We integrate very tightly with localization. We're going to talk about that, how we integrated the internationalization with localization quite a bit. And we also are known for our product Globalizer, which is a system for analyzing source code for internationalization issues and helping you find and fix those issues in code and reporting and all that kind of stuff. This isn't going to be, we'll touch on Globalizer in this webinar, but there's plenty on our site if you want to find out more, or just email me. But Globalizer is very important to our services practice in that it gives us a real competitive advantage in terms of finding issues, really quantifying exactly what they are, and letting our clients also interact with those issues, because chances are if we're performing internationalization, the development teams aren't exactly sitting on their hands either, so they need access to Globalizer as well. Gary, I'll let you take this screen.
Certainly, thanks, Adam. Sagen was actually founded in 1997 and is essentially a provider of global language translation and localization services. I guess our key competitive advantage is our GCMS system, which is an industry-leading cloud-based translation memory management system. So that offers us advantages like contextual level translation memory technology, automated workflows that speed up the localization process and just generally reduce the overhead. And we also have an outstanding translation memory technology. So we offer a number of flexible delivery approaches, including a managed services program. So I'll hand back to you there.
Okay, great. Gary, just as a heads up, it was a little hard to hear you on some of that, so maybe check your headset or whatever. All right, well, I want to launch into how this project got started a little bit. You know, the question comes up a lot. Is it internationalized? And this is, there's a common kind of difficulty in our industry in that the localization team within a company is often responsible for the localization, but they are kind of limited by how the internationalization is performed, and they are often not in a position to have the kind of technical detail or understanding from a technical side of what's going on the development team. And so bridging that gap between the two, of course we talk about Globalizer, but helping bridge that gap, but it's often kind of a sticky point for a lot of companies. Richard, this was the case for you, that you were concerned that internationalization was actually being covered early on the project. Gosh, it's actually over a year that we now that we first had that conversation. So, Richard, could you rehash what made you concerned that TelePresence was not internationalized?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I joined the TelePresence group a little over 2 years ago, and one of the first projects I got involved with is because I had some background and experience in internationalization and localization. I was asked to attend this meeting where they were planning already to how they were going to localize the product. And after asking a few questions, it generally becomes quite clear that engineering may think that they've internationalize their code, but the more questions you ask, the more you find out that it might be that they did not do a thorough job. So after asking significant enough questions, I got agreement from them to invest in an analysis to be done by Lingoport using Globalizer with just the only goal was to let's see if we really are or if there is anything that needs to be done. And the results we got back from the analysis indicated quite clearly that we were nowhere close to being ready for localization because of the way the code was constructed.
All right, thanks, Richard. And in fact, you know, going back in that memory, we really thought this was going to be a fairly quick checkmark type engagement because this does happen. And you know, often we come back and there's a few recommendations. We almost always find something, and that's really helpful. And there's some level of gap. TelePresence is a rather large system with all kinds of, well, first just the volume of source code, but there's all kinds of differences in terms of the various components. They use different programming languages. The requirements are quite unique for locale support. And so there was really quite a bit involved with internationalizing TelePresence, and some work had to be kind of refactored that had been done in the internationalization area. And there were large sections that actually hadn't seen true internationalization efforts. So the first step was, you can see, I've got a screenshot of a Globalizer scan, which was simply going through and scanning the source code, getting an idea. It gives us a really good inventory of internationalization issues. I'll touch on this again later in the presentation. But also architectural discussions, because you really have to find out the logic of how the software works and develop requirements of how you're going to support locale. When you talk about internationalization, there's what's in the code that has to be fixed. That's well covered with Globalizer. But there's also what's not in the code that has to be added, and that you want to focus on with an architectural discussion. And then really the next thing is to deliver a project plan. I'll have an example of the project plan. That project plan becomes your roadmap of how you go forward. So again, locale support means you really clearly define your requirements of how locale is going to be supported across the various product components. There were multiple programming languages, devices as well, which means thinking about embedded devices in this case, various web servers, And in this case, we also had quite a bit of flex code for one component. So in terms of just getting it done, we started with some project staging. We did an awful lot of design work up front. Setting up was also kind of complex. You can imagine that it was very clear TelePresence is a major product for Cisco with a ton of developers working on it, quite a large R&D organization. They were not going to sit on their hands while internationalization was going on. So there was going to be quite a bit of parallel effort. The other issue is because this is a very complex system, there was a lot to set up the developer environment. So we had to mirror here in Boulder everything that the software developers were doing in San Jose and elsewhere. Additionally, on Sagen's side, they also had to have this full development environment set up where you saw the test bed and all that, but all together. And we all had a common access to Cisco's network for issues like software builds, so that we had a build management strategy. It was very secure. There were all kinds of special network protocols and special equipment to use that were put in place. So setting up was not actually trivial. There was a lot involved in this. We also, you can't ignore the human element. We had to have some kind of a meeting between the developers on all the teams and the localization team as well, being included on, in terms of understanding what their objectives were, what made sense in going forward, when the handoffs would be, who would do what when. And again, build strategy was very, very key to this project. This is a screenshot of a project plan that I have behind me here. This was the project plan. I think this is the final version of it, but you can see it's really quite detailed. There's a lot going on here, starting with design of the various components. You see all kinds of implementation. Everything in green involves a handoff of types. So for instance, one of the things we would do is establish a strategy for string handling, get that approved from an architectural perspective, and start externalizing strings very quickly using Globalizer, and then passing those to Sagen so that Sagen would have the maximum amount of time to work with the application, get a good idea, and then reintegrate that in the product so that we could then have, kind of combined functional as well as linguistic testing. So you see, everything green in here, everything red involves sort of handoff issues. There's all kinds of merging activities and the like, and you can see this just goes on forever. This was quite a long plan, 490 steps until final delivery in quite a number of days. This project took, all in all, beginning to end was about a year. And there was a lot in between, as you might imagine, as development went ongoing. All right. Going back to screen. All right. So again, some basics. We were supporting 16 locales, so we went from just one locale being used worldwide to 16 locales in the initial effort. I am including U.S. English because you should always, English is just another locale. Locale means language support, but it also means a whole lot more. Think sorting, date, time. There was a lot of time zone issues, as you might imagine, with a product like this, as you send out calendar events and you coordinate across time zones. There was a lot in the area of string handling, bidirectional language support. Unicode was a very big issue for that. There were all these multilingual surveys as well. Surveys are integral to how this product is actually implemented and used. And again, that has to happen across multiple components and databases, so a lot of complexity. Again, we did, I mentioned string externalization especially, although that is hardly the full scope of a project like this. But it is the most visible aspect, and I know there are a lot of people involved with localization on the phone call. We use Globalizer to do that. You can see in here the interface lets us find the issue. This is what it looks like in source code. We can see it. We can generate reports, get approval on those strings, and prioritize the strings. You see a little bit of that. It's probably in very small print on your side. And then by grouping those, actually start the string externalization fairly aggressively. And again, you have these methods or functions depending upon the programming language that will be different. And clearly they were all across TelePresence that had to be found and refactored on a use case basis. Globalizer, again, helps us find those issues and move forward. And then finally, instead of waiting till the end of the project, we actually integrated testing into the full project plan. So we actually started testing right away. So the first thing you do is you get a handoff of the source code. You make sure it actually runs. You run your smoke tests. You go forward. But we also were regularly, as we move forward, performing internationalization tests with pseudo locales. We kind of fake data, and then as soon as we had localization started, we'd start integrating the localization and providing an ongoing testing. It actually really made the product strong, and Richard, you might have something to add around that even outside of internationalization, how Rita integrated with your team. I'm putting you on the spot here, but.
Well, no, that actually turned out to be invaluable because throughout, after she learned the system very well and was really only focusing on internationalization testing, her as well as the guys in Dublin on Gary's team, they actually found bugs for us that were just product bugs that we were able to get fixes for. So that was actually a bit of a bonus in that I'm sure that my own test team might have found those eventually, but we got them found and fixed early, so that's invaluable, actually.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, Richard. And at this point, we're running just a tiny bit behind. I get to turn it over to Gary. And Gary, take it away. Gary, I think I'm going to have to click for you because I'm having a little hiccup here.
Okay, that's no problem. Thank you, Adam. I hope you can all hear me okay. My voice is traveling, I'd say, approximately 10,000 miles across Cisco equipment, so if you're having trouble hearing me, you know who to blame.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
I get the digs in early. So I guess a useful analogy for our relationship, our collaborative relationship, would be somewhat akin to a relay race, where Cisco has created a groundbreaking English product that we're delighted to be working on. Lingoport have adapted that product to make sure that it will work in an international environment and that it can be localized. And Sagen is very much hurtling towards the finish line, translating the internationalized content and testing the product to ensure that it meets Cisco's internet customers' needs. But they're not actually over yet, and we're still working on the international releases. I hope Richard will agree that we haven't dropped the baton yet. But essentially,
no, we have not.
Cisco TelePresence is about an 11,000 word software project, along with some help and documentation, and it's translated into 15 locales. And for many of you who either work in the localization industry or perhaps are in the software manufacturing industry and localize your own products, that doesn't sound like a very, very complex product. It just doesn't sound like much of a challenge. So where is the complexity? Essentially, the complexity is in the product itself. In order to represent 15 locales, as you can see from the slide, we use 15 local servers. So you'll have seen going back 2 slides, our own testbed. We have 2 call managers, an Exchange AD server, 3 VMware servers, 3 Cisco TelePresence manager servers, 3 CTMS multi-point switches, and 3 CTRS recording servers. So very much as is the case with Adam and their test lab, we actually haven't had to turn on the heating in our building for approximately 6 months now. So we're making a significant saving on air conditioning. We have a further remote configuration then in the Cisco lab in San Jose, and that's to replicate a typical customer environment over a wide area network using that Cisco VPN router. So as you can see, it's a pretty significant hardware infrastructure, and because of this, there are many failure points beyond the introduction of localized content. So I mean, typically, no process is flawless. You will get bugs from a localization perspective through the translation of the localized content, but beyond that, I think that this kind of environment presents opportunities to fail, but thankfully it's actually gone quite smoothly. So if you can.
By the way, Gary, it was pilot error on my part. You now have control.
Okay.
There you go.
Sorry about the trouble there. Okay, so our testbed consists of 43 unique operating systems. If you could actually, I think we're going a bit haywire on the slides, which weren't made by Cisco.
Do you want me to back it up too?
Yeah, could you please?
Okay. Hold on.
This is a quick preview of the rest of my presentation.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Now you should be good. You should be able to take over the mouse again.
That's perfect. Thank you. So our testbed consists of about 43 unique operating systems and, of course, the English equivalents. These are all virtualized with the exception of the Mac OS. We don't rerun all of our test cases across the entire spectrum of operating systems for every build, but instead, on a build-by-build basis, we'll alternate through specific host systems and different browser combinations. The fact that we've actually found and raised defects for specific OS and browser combinations suggests that certainly this level of testing has been warranted. But we've essentially used the VM servers that we have in hand to minimize the actual amount of hardware and footprint requirement. So one of the key challenges when localizing a product like this is ensuring that the terminology is appropriate, firstly to the particular domain, but secondly to ensure consistency across Cisco's own products. So when you consider that as our translators are translating actual software content, a specific term could come from one of a multitude of different IT and technology backgrounds, but also we need to make sure that we're maintaining consistent terminology across different third-party products and the like. So that represents quite a significant challenge. We're supported very much during the translation process using GCMS, our translation memory system. But however, apart from that, we also need to have a very, very detailed knowledge of the actual content itself and the context in which the software is actually used to support our translators during the translation process. In this regard, I think Lingoport were a very useful partner in that, while we're very much working from a black box perspective, Lingoport could trace back for a specific term to look at its actual usage in the context of running software. But also paired with that, we carry out a thorough in-context review process. So that I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but essentially it's using native language speakers to test the product in the running environment. So the types of testing we do, essentially we start with the localization readiness and IETNet sufficiency testing, which would, for example, include things like loading up our Active Directory database with users and profiles from native language targeted locales. And we'd also configure each of the phones and codecs for the appropriate locales and just ensure that the flow of information through the system and functionality is working just as it would be expected to work for the target markets. Post-translation then would typically carry two different forms of testing. Carry out localization testing, which is primarily focused on making sure that the functionality and the look and feel of the localized body of work is correct for the target market. And once we've done that, once the actual functionality of the product is stable, and the user interface is pretty stable as well. We carry out the in-context review process. And for that, as I was saying, we use native language speakers familiar with the particular domain. So it would be in the IP telephony type market with networking experience. So I mean, our test engineers require a very broad range of technology experience, including networking, multimedia, IP telephony, directory services, and collaboration software, as well as lots of virtualization technologies and some of Cisco's own partnering products.
Hey Gary, it's Chris.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you, from the audience, can you adjust your microphone just a little bit? It's much better, but I don't know if you can get it a little bit closer.
How's that coming across, Chris?
No, sounds good. Let's try that.
Okay. So I just want to move back a slide. So as Adam and his team can testify, locale negotiation can present its own challenges, where the locale can be determined or influenced in a wide variety of ways. So for example, user profile settings, so the locale of a specific TelePresence user can be established on the end user's own environment, so they can select their own locale within the system, but also predetermined by an administrator. But it can also be determined by the user's local environment, so for example, their operating system and their specific browser language. And then of course, we have the actual devices themselves. So you can have a system or a locale associated with a specific IP phone or an endpoint. So with just such a large, significant number of variables, the test paths for testing a product like this just become very, very complex. So as I was saying earlier, to ensure that the translations are appropriate for the actual context, we, sorry, I think I'm on the wrong slide. We need to carry out in-context review testing using native language speakers on site, supported by our local testing and engineering teams. So our test cases, which leverage the solid work that's been done by Lingoport and Cisco, are very, very detailed. They allow us to manage and support the in-context review process, to allow self-negotiation through the product with a focus on localization-specific concerns. So there are small overlaps with some of the work that Lingoport would do, certainly in the testing side of things, but I think it's very much a mutually beneficial overlap, where we've been in a position to report some internationalization issues based on our broad testing spectrum, and Adam's team have been very much able to support our localization effort based on their intricate code-level knowledge of the actual system. As I mentioned, the project is still very much ongoing, and we're constantly updating our test cases to adapt and support new features or changes to functionality within the product itself. So I think some of the successes of this collaboration effort are that, you know, I think Lingoport, as Adam has suggested, have a very good knowledge of the localization industry. So we very much, you know, receive very good detailed localization kits that have very much supported our effort, and great technical support from Cisco's side in what is a very, very technical and complex product. One of the things that I found was particularly beneficial is that, you know, we had a broad range of subject matter expertise between Adam's team and the team here in Sage in Dublin and the various teams that work on the Cisco site. Responsiveness was never really an issue, and I think despite the fact that we're actually quite a distributed team worldwide across a number of different time zones, I don't think that ever really posed a challenge for the project team. And I think you know, everybody managed to work together as one strong virtual team. So on that note, Adam, I'll hand back to you.
Okay. Just the emphasis on the success is that the three independent teams working successfully together. You know, I can't. A lot can go wrong there, and you know, while we all do the very best we can to make sure that's not an issue, it's really up to all the individual team members to understand that. And so we had really good use of email distribution lists. I mean, it was all the little things. There's no real secret to this, but it's all the little things. Regular meetings, a common bug tracking system are some of the tools we used across things, and also just being really reliant upon one another for issues like product builds and the like, and architectural documentation, localization issues going back and forth. It was really a great thing to see. The other success story is that this was actually a very difficult product infrastructure. I'm as proud of that as of the actual work that we actually managed that, because there was a lot that's very specific to this product, as well as specific to the way that Cisco handles source code in a secure fashion that we had to integrate and get working together, and that involved way more than I can give in this webinar. The other thing, and I'm taking a really, I'm teasing Richard about here by putting a TM there, but Richard is one of the best people I've ever worked with in terms of getting and keeping funding across a large and long-term complex project through various company reorgs that seem to happen all the time, no matter where you work. So Richard, I can explain what the Richard principle is, but I think you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, first of all, there is no such thing. There is no trademark for it. And the funding part was, you know, I actually was surprised that you found it unusual that we were able to maintain the funding. I had executive sponsorship from the beginning, which was a requirement for taking this, that if I needed funding to get things done, that they would provide it. And all you have to do around Cisco is when you request funding quarterly, you not only do you want to make sure you accurately reflect how much you need, but you need to also let the decision makers, the stakeholders, know what is the consequences of not getting the funding. And if you can clearly iterate that, they have a simple choice: is do we fold the project because I don't have any more money, or do we stay committed to this and continue to fund it? And being we had considerable changes to scope throughout, with the user interface screens changing or the IVR prompts changing or additions. It was always necessary to assess that and then submit a request for more funding with the proper amount of justification that it was not that difficult to actually get done.
Right, and the reason why I do mention that is that funding for a project of this size is, you know, it's like oxygen. If you don't have it, you don't kind of continue. It's an issue that I've seen periodically, although it's extremely rare to have an internationalization project canceled midway. I think it's happened once in all the years we're in business, and certainly had nothing to do with us. It was more business issues, but
it was actually not. We had a very good return on investment proposal from our product marketing and management team. So I had to get funding approved all the way up to senior vice president level, but with all of that background information, it was really the only difficulty is getting their attention and getting them to go ahead and, you know, they're very busy people, to go ahead and approve and assign on it. But other than that, it's not a chore.
Right, and I've seen many projects over the years get hiccuped because of delays, because the funding proposition wasn't as clearly defined by the company executives. And in terms of not understanding what happens if they don't go forward, that wasn't clearly communicated. So I do want to emphasize that you did an excellent job in that area, and one that was rather complete. So take a bow. But all right, the other issue is, as Richard mentioned, there was a lot of change scope during the project, and that you have at times when you have ongoing feature development concurrent to the project. there's always that as a potential issue. So you move things around as you go, and you plan between the groups. But that was pretty well done between our teams, and that was really a good thing to see. There were a lot of merges of new code, so that we didn't have what one project manager here calls a golden moment. And the idea of a golden moment is it never really materializes. If you try to merge everything together at only one spot in a project, you're setting yourself up for a lot of trouble. And so we really had a lot of touch points where we bring everything together, test it, and the like as we went on. Finally, there was a lot of work around upgrading technology to support BiDi languages. In one programming language's case, the Flex, we actually were right on the cusp of what internal Flex development, the people at Adobe who developed the Flex language, were doing. And it was really helpful that as a company we had good ties to some of that development team. Adobe, I consider a very friendly team. The globalization team is very friendly with Lingoport, and they were very helpful in terms of helping us get done what Cisco needed to get done when we would have really deep questions that were just not covered in any Flex documentation. And this is actually a very good beneficial relationship on both sides. So a little behind-the-scenes work. All right. Finally, in terms of lessons learned, we'll go around and see if there's anything to add. I think we probably got it all. That's a picture of a Lingoport meeting together in our office, in our conference room, with some of the Cisco execs and some of the Lingoport people. That's Richard over there. This happens to be my lovely wife. You can see the high side of her face. She's a manager here. And that's Lori, who led the project from a technical aspect. Lori is one of the most experienced people you'll find for leading difficult internationalization projects and keeping them moving and architecturally managing. She's very, very deep on the technical side, but also on the management side. And some of the Cisco team, this is Satyavrat, Kent, and Jonathan. And John, and that's Rita here from our team who performed a lot of the QA. I think she was giving a demo. But with that, anything further to add, Gary or Richard? And I'm hoping we have the question board just completely lights up as well.
I think one of the key lessons that we certainly learned is that we need more cooling in our test lab.
Yeah, I can vouch that.
You know, it was planned that you would be doing this over the winter and that it would have been helping you. So, but no, I would add to it is the fact that all of these merges that we were doing and staying in sync, the whole team was actually, all of Port and all of SageN were part of the development team here, and were looked upon that way. Kent Gray was very instrumental in helping us organize and keep this thing moving forward. Lori was fabulous. Rita's testing was great. You mentioned Satyavrat and John that are in the picture here. Satyavrat is taking ownership of this code for a portion of the code, as well as John is key for the endpoint code. And we walked out of that meeting feeling extremely good that this was handled properly and that they had no questions, comments, concerns, and took ownership of the code as a result of the work that was done and what was shown at that meeting. And of course, Nina was instrumental in keeping us moving with the financials.
All right. Well, thanks, Richard. We have our first technical question that just came in. Let me start with Avinash, although I don't have an answer to his question, but I want to bring it up because it's a good one. Chris, do you want to read it, or you want me to?
Let me go ahead and do it. Actually, Adam, if you want to go to the next slide, displaying the contact information.
Ah, yes, that's right.
Great. And we do have we want to say we have a lot of questions, so we'll try to get we get up to 15 minutes left. Maybe Adam, if you quickly want to.
Sure.
And then we'll get questions.
Sure. You know, a lot of times people walk away, have questions later, you're welcome to contact either me or Gary. And that's the short version that everybody can spell of my email address. And then Gary is gcondon@Sagen. There are a lot of resources on both companies' websites. Lingoport has a ton of white papers. We regularly put webinar recordings back up. There'll be a recording of this if you want to bring a friend in to listen to it or review it later. We also have this IHN blog, which is pretty active and a little less formal. We invite you to visit there regularly, where we'll have various events and ideas and the like that get discussed there. And finally, if you're interested in Globalizer, you can sign up for a trial account at globalizer.com. I want to emphasize that we have our next webinar is in the makings. We're targeting June 16th. We don't have a page for it yet, but you'll probably see email from us about it. And that's about creating an IATN scorecard. We've developed this really cool technology that plugs in with Globalizer that actually keeps track of your internationalization project scan after scan, and it measures all kinds of different really neat criteria in terms of your global readiness. It's pretty cool. It's really very much a first to have a dashboard for your internationalization development. So we're very excited about that, supporting globalization teams and development teams and localization teams. We'll be talking about that and unveiling it. All right, Chris.
Thanks a lot. All right, we get a lot of questions, so I think we're going to make these, try to get through these questions. Question from Avinash. What is the basis of choosing which test case should be run on which platform, for example? What techniques you use to optimize the testing matrix?
All right. I'm going to take a first hit at that, and then Gary, you can probably back me up a little bit. Speaking as someone who really just was kind of in the background making sure the project was moving along, I don't have quite as much detail to answer this question as, say, Rita or Lori would, but the test cases are actually developed as you go. So we work with the client's test cases, and then we design the test cases based on locale requirements. So there's a lot of upfront decision criteria, and that goes into a lot of use cases, as well as understanding the technology and what parts of the technology are being tested. So if something new is being worked on, we're going to obviously test that area of the code quite specifically. Additionally, that would happen when Cisco developers were working on an area of the code where we were performing internationalization. We'd want to test that area and make sure that the internationalization was not broken. Same goes for localization. So very much that is how we would build the matrix, was based on building the requirements and test requirements up front, but also interacting with the areas of code that were being tested on a very regular basis. We did that using a whole lot of pseudo-localization. Pseudo-localization is a functional technique to not just dummy up strings to look like they are localized data that might have English in between, but say put pad characters, say Chinese characters on one side or the other or both sides of an English string. But you also need to pass that all the way from database through the application. A lot of times people just do the display or the UI side of pseudo-localization, but there's another level where you actually pass it through the application and pass issues like date time support. Various email templates had to be tested very regularly. The surveys and likelihood all had to be functionally worked on. So it's not just about pseudo-locale. Anything to add, Gary?
Yes, I just add that a lot of the actual, I guess, the platform coverage is determined, or certainly guidance is provided by Cisco, certainly from the marketing team. Looking at their customer base and certainly from a locale perspective, and looking at what operating systems their customers are using, what browsers are more prevalent in a specific target market, and ensuring that we're essentially replicating as much as we can our customers and Cisco's customers' target market to make sure that we're hitting the maximum amount of customers that we can during our testing process. Now, it does look, if you go back, well, you don't actually need to negotiate, so back to the other slide, but we have 43 different target operating systems. We're getting builds approximately, I think, every 2 weeks, sometimes more frequently than that and sometimes less frequently. But, for example, on a specific build, we might target testing Arabic, Vista 32-bit. And then, for example, we wouldn't look at testing any other platforms until a subsequent build, where we might look at Windows 7, the 64-bit version of that OS with a different browser selection to the previous test box. So essentially, it's quite an economic process and covering a lot of ground. But I guess, in terms of Cisco's customers, it's all about trying to maximize the amount of coverage that exists within Cisco's customer base, and making sure that any potential for bugs, make sure that these things don't escape and they're captured during the production process rather than hitting the customer in the field.
All right. Let's take Gary's question. We have Gary Leffman who asked a question. He happens to be a internationalization and localization expert working at Cisco. He's in the UK, so that's a name I recognize. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, great. Why did Richard choose to outsource internationalization testing instead of using internal Cisco resources? Richard?
That's a quick.
Yeah, wow, nice question, Gary. The reason I chose to go that direction is that the people that were doing the actual localization as well as the internationalization, I thought were very capable of doing it. Also, it was probably, as slow as things move around here at Cisco, I didn't feel like I could get anything set up in time at other locations, that is at Cisco, facilities at Cisco, in order to get this completed on time. Because I had to equip my vendors with equipment anyway, we might as well have the testing done there rather than put it in here. So that was the reason for that choice.
All right, great. Let me see. Let's take a question from Gamidi. Did we come across any successful process that worked as part of the successful stories? For example, parallel development and periodic merges.
I'll take that to start. I have to say it's not like some special, unique secret. It's mostly about communication, about good both email communications, meetings. On several occasions, Lingoport engineers would visit Cisco engineers. Also, we had this really neat TelePresence system that happened to be in the building. But there's also a lot of documentation in terms of how to go forward, so that there's actually reference materials that were available on wikis, good email distribution lists. But the very first thing is you're trying to avoid problems versus solve problems. So it's always easier if you avoid a problem. And then when the problems come up, they tend to be a little bit more straightforward. But the important thing was to be in communications when people submitted a build, to make sure that nobody was breaking anything. And there were occasions where something would not get included, and a key part of that was Rita testing very quickly to make sure that all the internationalization changes were not being overwritten during a merge, or new functionality that was being developed wasn't being overwritten as well. So that required good communication within our engineering and testing groups, respective to both organizations. We had, as I mentioned, a common VPN system. So what we'd do is we'd merge locally here in Lingoport amongst our team, and then we'd have one particular machine that would be the merge machine, where a combined merge from Lingoport code would be then merged with Cisco code. And again, tested right away to make sure nothing was broken and the like. Anything to add on your side, Gary or Richard?
Well, just to mention, coming from a slightly different angle, in terms of a development process and an internationalization process that's running in parallel with the localization efforts, certainly one of the things that we strove to do was to actually stagger localization cycles. So we're not essentially translating on demand as each new user interface piece is added to the code base. So I mean, what that allows us to do is essentially to reduce the overall cost of the translation process and have a better understanding of exactly what localization content is in the actual builds themselves, and closer aligned then with Lingoport and Cisco in terms of the bugs that are being raised. So we all have a solid understanding across the three teams of what's in there and what's yet to be translated as part of a future iteration.
Great. Chris, you want? Richard, unless you have nothing to add, I think we kind of killed that one.
Right.
All right. Chris, you want to take the next question?
Let me see. Adam, do you have a preference on which question is next? We have
yeah, we are running out of time. Let's see. We have a couple from Marta, which I'm not sure I understand the questions, but we'll get to. Why don't we take 2 or 3 and try to roll through them quickly. How about we go with Julia's question?
All right, great. A question regarding the QA testing. Did you implement any test automation? If so, what tool do you use?
Richard, you want to take that one first, since you're
well, we have quite a suite of automation tests done here for a lot of our regression. So when we would get new builds of software that had the internationalization incorporated into it, we'd run them through an automation test bed here. I don't know the exact nature of what tools were used, but we do have automation set up here, and every time we get a build, we kick off an automation run.
On Lingoport's case, we use those automated tools to an extent, but mostly our automated tool was Rita. She just really learned the system quite well, and while it's hard to cover an entire application, that's why you test during the whole effort, so that as a new area is being engineered, you have your clear test cases that are very well documented, and you work with them. Sometimes, particularly in our case, that's the easier system than relying solely on automation, although automation is really important. Anything to add, Gary?
No, I think you pretty much summed it up. I mean, Cisco are continually working, as Richard testified, to provide further automation in terms of the testing and reduce, I guess, their overall costs. So we are working towards trying to leverage whatever we can in terms of the automation that's currently in use on the development side of things, and see where we can adopt that.
Adam, quick question for you, Frank. What programming languages does Globalizer support?
Oh, a whole lot of them. If you went down the list, you'd find Java, C, HTML. For HTML, you'll see that in a lot of web situations, so like Java, JSP, anything .NET, so you'll see ASPX, as well as C# and various .NET languages. There's also a whole lot more like JavaScript, even Delphi. It's quite a long list. And when you don't see something on the list, often we have something internally from a services project that we can pass on to you. It's one of the benefits of Globalizer, is that there's a lot of capability for interaction and plugging in how the software works across teams. We take advantage of that with our customers. So, for instance, for Flex, we don't have a specific Flex rule set in Globalizer, but what we did is we modified a JavaScript rule set to be able to help us support Flex, where as a result of that work, we'll actually have an action script rule set that will work across Flex and a number of other web-centric presentation languages in our next release. But great question. I always like that one.
Great. Quick question for Richard. Richard, can you predict a specific return on investment for this project at this point?
Oh yeah, millions. But no, I don't. How we end up doing in the marketplace, though, it's hard to say. Although we do know that our product marketing and sales saying that we're preventing them from. We're losing a lot of sales that just stay on. That they end up losing because we're not localized, and they're telling us how much more they can. But I don't have a specific number yet.
Okay.
I want to just mention my kind of take on ROI. We all get pulled into ROI, and I see a lot of companies struggle with this, and around tools and the like. There's often a lot of focus on, if I do this, how much money will this save me? And while that's an important conversation, I know that people measure that. Sometimes I feel like it's sort of like picking up quarters on a busy street and not worrying about getting hit by a car. It's a strange analogy, but it's like, wow, you're looking at saving a quarter when, for instance, we were working with a company that was considering Globalizer, and one of their issues was they had a major release for Germany, and the German product manager was furious because the product got released without handling date time correctly in a very, very schedule-oriented product. So here's a case where they worried about counting beans when they should have been worried about getting hit by the car, so to speak, having the cost of releasing a product that is insufficient for that market, when all they had to do was, they actually tested Globalizer on this. They used their before and after to see if Globalizer would have found those issues, and it did. So here it was that they rushed to market, they saved a little money, and then the larger issue is that they came out with a product that now it's much more expensive to fix. Remember, early on I said it's always much more expensive to fix stuff later in the game, and I can't think of anything worse than after release as being a time when you have to fix things, because you have to retest it, bring it all in, everybody's moved on, and the like. So that's my dramatic ROI speech. I said we would take Marta's question, so Chris, you want to read that one?
Actually, Marta, she's going to contact Gary directly. I think we're already over time. And
okay.
Yeah. I'd like to thank especially Richard from Cisco for doing this webinar with us, Gary from Station, Adam, thank you very much. It was a really interesting session. We had a ton of interest in this webinar. I'll be sending the link to all the registrants, hopefully by early next week. If you'd like to sign up for the next webinar, go to lingoport.com or a blog, I18N blog, in the very near future. Any last words from the presenters?
This is great. This is really great to do, and it's, of course, been an absolutely fabulous project.
All right. Again, thank you very much to all the presenters. Thank you to all the attendees, and we'll see you next time.